Dana Mathewson.
The 33-year-old is still one of the top wheelchair tennis players in the world.
Hey everyone, Jamie here. Welcome to Flame Bearers Unedited, a brand new series bringing to you largely unedited conversations. We heard you loud and clear. You want to hear more stories of more elite women athletes from around the world. So we're going to deliver. In Unedited, we're going to bring you completely unfiltered conversations. We hit start, we have our conversation, we hit end. What we're going to see though is slightly different because we're not going to have all the traditional bells and whistles that you're used to in Flame Bearers production. So let's jump in.
I am coming in from Orlando, Florida. I am a wheelchair tennis player, and my name is Dana Mathewson.
Amazing. So Dana, catch us up to speed. I've been following your career for a while now. You're a pretty big deal, but for those who don't know you, tell us about wheelchair tennis and how you got into it.
Yeah, so wheelchair tennis is very similar to its able-bodied counterpart, which I think is so cool. For anyone that's never seen wheelchair tennis before, literally just imagine people playing on a normal tennis court, the same net height, same rules, same painted lines that you're used to seeing, but put them in a wheelchair and give them a second bounce if they want to use it. And that's wheelchair tennis. I had never honestly heard of it before I got injured when I was 10 years old. I got a really rare autoimmune disease called transverse myelitis. And that sounds like really scientific and complicated, but basically I was able-bodied, I was running sprints, I was a soccer player, and my immune system just attacked my spine because it thought something was wrong with it when really nothing was wrong, and it made me have to use a wheelchair. So that crazy turn of events led me to being introduced to adaptive sports, which I'm so lucky that my mom talked to all these different rec therapists in San Diego, where I was from and was living at the time. And she found this camp that was being held in Coronado, and she signed me up. And I have to be honest with you, I had no experience with Paralympics. I had no experience with any person with a disability, really, that wasn't elderly. San Diego is a really big city. I considered myself like a very non-sheltered kid, but I had no exposure to any of this. And so when I heard about it, I was like, absolutely not. I'm not doing that. Like, don't put me in there with those kids. Like, I was scared, you know? And so I think that I'm really glad that my mom didn't listen to me, and she was like, no, I'm sorry. You're going to be an active kid. It doesn't matter if you have a disability or not. And she put me in this camp. And I remember sitting in a tennis chair for the first time, seeing other kids that had disabilities for the first time, hitting a tennis ball. And ironically, I actually hated tennis when I was able-bodied, but for whatever reason, I just didn't like it. I was a soccer player, you know, and then it just clicked. And so that's how I found wheelchair tennis, but I also played wheelchair basketball for some time. I tried wheelchair rugby. I went to those multi-sport camps where I tried archery and even water sports and all that. So I tried everything, but tennis stuck.
Wow. Thank you so much for walking us through that. So many of our listeners are at different phases of their journey. For those who are kind of where you were after your accident, can you share, if you're comfortable, what that was like for you, what that transition was like, and any advice you would give to people in a similar phase?
I think that's such a good question, and it's honestly one that I don't get asked very often. I think so many people ask about like how my life was once I figured out that I was okay and that like I could play sports. But that transition before that happened was really hard. So I was 10 and a half years old. I'm a preteen. I don't know if that's even preteen yet, but 10 and a half, right? So if you can think back to when you were 10 and a half or even 11 or 12, you're looking at what all the other girls are wearing at school. You guys all want to have, the same clothes. You want to wear your hair the same way. You want to look the same. Everyone's starting to worry about body image a little bit by that age. And, that horrible self-conscious phase starts around that time. And you threw me into a wheelchair and having a disability. And that was just horrible. I mean, I can't think of a more self-conscious time in my life. I'm so lucky that I had such great friends at that time. And, everyone just treated me the same. I know this isn't the same experience for everyone, but I didn't experience bullying due to my disability. So I was very lucky in that respect. I think a lot of my bullying was maybe coming from myself, that, I was undesirable, or like no one would want to like me at school now, or, people would treat me different. And that's, I think, a universal experience for a lot of people having a disability or not. There's always something about you that you defect or that you can't hide. And I think that was the hardest part about having a disability, was that no matter what clothes I wore, no matter how I learned to do my makeup or how pretty I did my hair, I couldn't hide that I had a disability, because the first thing you're going to see about me for the rest of my life when I go into a room is that I'm sitting in a chair. And people are going to wonder about that. And I think in that phase of my life, I always felt like I had to learn then to be funnier. I had to be prettier. I had to overcompensate for what I saw as a huge defect, and for what society teaches you is a huge defect. And so that was really hard. And I think, and I'd be lying to you if I said that wasn't still hard for me. It's a lot less difficult now than it was then, but I like I said, I'd be lying if I said I didn't have those days where I wake up and I hate that I'm not still able-bodied, or I think it's unfair. But I think that's why I clung to sports so much, because sports really showed me how much my body can still do. I was celebrated for what my body was doing, as opposed to seeing my body as something that didn't do stuff anymore. And it was freeing, seeing myself in that light and being good at something physical. I think that's why that was such a huge part of my life, in a way that I never thought that it would be.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Dana.
Yeah.
I asked that question because we pretty much every day, every couple of days, we get comments from parents of young girls who recently were in an accident or recently got sick and something happened. And they say they're looking for advice from people who have gone through it before. So thank you for sharing that. I imagine that is a challenging question to answer and to be super honest about. So thank you.
Well, I realized that I didn't really give any advice too, but I feel like the best thing that I could say, if I was, they have like, you write a letter to your younger self, like what would you say? And I think it would just be like to know that people see you in a different way than you see yourself. And a lot of times other people see you in a lot more positive light than you see yourself when you look in the mirror. And I think that we are our own worst enemies when we look in a mirror. You're very quick, I think, to look at all the things we hate about ourselves. Whereas when I look at you right now, I can say like, wow, she has beautiful eyes. But when you look in a mirror, you might not see that, right? You're going to jump to something that you hate about yourself. And I think that it would be good for us to try to see ourselves the way that other people see us. And although that's not advice that I take every day, I think that would be my advice for a young person getting used to their new body. Is like, although it doesn't work the same way that it used to, doesn't mean that there's something horrible with it, or that society won't accept you, or that you won't be able to accomplish great things. You just have to find a new way to make that body work for you, and it is going to work for you.
Wow. You just gave me such goosebumps.
As I said, you have pretty eyes, right?
No. Yeah, okay. Thank you. So, catch us up to speed. So, you're 10 years old. You're playing all these adaptive sports. You've gone on to represent Team USA 3 times in the Paralympics, been a multiple Pan American medalist. How did you get from 10-year-old Dana trying to figure this out to serious elite competitive athlete?
I wish that I had like that one quick answer to that. I think it was all like a snowball effect, honestly. Like I started tennis as something that I wanted to do to just find myself again and to stay active. And then I just loved it so much that I wanted to play as many times as I could after school. And that was like, I think Tuesdays and Thursday nights at Barnes Tennis Center. It was from 6 to 8 p.m. And I would go out there twice a week, and then I got a coach. And then that led to me playing in tournaments. And then that led to me getting scouted for college at the University of Arizona. And then that led to me wanting to play more and more. And then that led to me wanting to play my first Paralympics. And then that led to, being on Team USA. Then that led to going pro full time, and then getting to play 2 more Paralympic games and getting to play in the Grand Slams and winning a Grand Slam. And I don't think I ever set out thinking that sports would be my job. I always thought it was, I approached it the same way that most kids do, where it's like, this is just what I do after school. I do it with my friends. And it never was that main intention for me. It just kind of slowly became that. And I'm kind of grateful that was the way that it was. Like I got to enjoy the journey a little bit more, I think, as opposed to seeing it as like, this is what I need to do. I have to be this person. And then just constantly fighting with it on the way there. It was a beautiful journey. I can't believe that part is over, but it was great.
Wow. And I know you're in a very different place today. So tell us about your recent announcement and kind of where you are now.
Yeah, so I retired about, 2.5 weeks ago. I know, I can't believe it. It sounds crazy. But I think I just realized that as much as I still love tennis, I was ready for some new challenges, if that makes sense. And not to say that tennis is boring or not challenging, but it really is. But I think I just wanted something new. There's a lot of sacrifice that goes into being a professional athlete, as all of your guests on this show can tell you. And I think that I fell out of love with the sport to the extent that I was like, I can't make those sacrifices anymore. It's not worth it anymore. And I think that's when I knew.
Talk to us a little bit about that. That's so interesting. And that's something I've heard before about athletes falling back in love, falling out of love. So was it like an aha moment? How did you realize that? And then how did you have the guts to walk away? Because that's also scary too.
Yeah. I don't know if it was an aha moment. I think it was a slow burn. So tennis, I can't speak for other sports, but in tennis, the competition schedule is pretty rigorous. At the pro level, you're playing and away from home at least 30 plus weeks out of the year. And so that doesn't give you a lot of home time. And then when you are home, you're not just hanging out, you're training, because that's your only time to then practice something new. So you really don't have much of an off season. Like even right now is technically the off season, but for those that are gearing up for Australia, which is in January, it's preseason. So it's a pretty grueling schedule. And I think that after I got married last year, I think I started. Thank you. Yeah, we just had our first anniversary on the 2nd. So I know, I can't believe it's already been a year.
That's amazing.
But I think, getting married, I got a dog during COVID. I started to have all these things that I loved so much at home that I didn't have before. And so it made going away harder and harder each time. And I think that just started to shift my focus a little bit. It made me realize that I had more than one or two things in my life that I really cared about. And it used to just be tennis. And like a lot of my good friends were on the road. So when I was traveling, I was with everyone that I cared about. But that shifted, I think, when I met my husband and when I moved to Orlando and I started to build such a foundation with my coaches here and things like that. So I think it was really just a slow burn where I was like, do you know what? I don't know if this is worth that time missed with loved ones anymore. And, I was missing seeing my mom. I miss seeing my niece. My niece is 3 years old now, and I've seen her maybe a handful of times. And I'd like to change that, And it was worth all those sacrifices before, but I just don't really feel like doing those anymore. And I think that's how I knew.
Yeah, that's so fair and good for you for like identifying that and reacting to that in the moment.
Yeah.
I saw that you're also a director of clinical audiology. What is that? I was like, I'm going to have to Google this, but I feel like if I have a question, I'm guessing other people do too. So number one, what is it? And what are your hopes post-tennis?
Sure. So I have a doctor of audiology. So I am technically a doctor, but not in the MD sense. I went to school for clinical audiology. So for people that don't know what that is, it's basically like when you go and get your hearing checked, like I'm that person that checks your hearing and lets you know how bad the hearing is. If you need to have a hearing aid, I program that for you.
Wow.
So not the person that you would go see at like a Costco or something like that, or someone that you'd see in a hospital. That's what I got my degree in. And I actually got to study overseas to do that too, which was really cool time in my life. I lived in London for 3 years, getting to do some of that, which was so cool. But yeah, after tennis, ironically, after I talked all about that, I don't think I'm going to do audiology at all.
Whatever works.
Yeah, right? So while there's a lot of transferable skills, I think, from those degrees, like, I've learned to problem solve a lot, work with a lot of different people. I don't think that I want to work in audiology. I think that I've made so many cool connections in the tennis world, and I still love the sport so much. While I don't want to travel and compete and make those sacrifices I talked about, I still love the game. I still think it's a beautiful sport. I still love analyzing it when people are playing. I still love watching it. And so that's how I knew I didn't want to be done. And that's probably what's made my retirement a little easier, is that I'm not fully saying goodbye. If you saw my retirement video at the end, I said like I'm just forming a new relationship with it. And I think that's true. So what I really want to do ultimately is be kind of a consultant in the tennis space. So that means like if there's ever a need for commentary at tournaments, I could be that person. I could also help be a tournament director. Wheelchair tennis is so cool in that it's one of the few para sports or adaptive sports that's gotten really professionalized. And I think all the other sports are on their way, but tennis has had a leg up because it's so similar to its able-bodied counterpart that we're integrated into a lot of those events. And now that that integration is happening more and more, they're going to need more people like me to help jumpstart those tournaments. And I think it's a cool time to have retired and kind of be that person. So I want to do that. I want to help coach. I actually just got back from working with a couple of our players over at the tennis center.
So cool.
Doing podcasts like this with you and doing other public speaking type of things. I think it's kind of having me all over the map, but I'm excited about that because I don't have to pigeonhole myself into one area. But that's the short and long version of what I want to do.
That is so exciting. So
Thanks.
I know in your video and just now you mentioned commentating. What are you hoping to do differently? So you've had this incredible career. You've heard and seen commentators get it wrong. So what are you hoping to change? I'm sure, as an elite para-athlete, a Paralympian, you have seen people get it wrong. What do you want to do differently?
I think it's a really almost an easy, I don't want to say easy to trivialize the people that have already done it, because that's not what I mean by this at all.
Yeah.
But what I'm trying to say is that wheelchair tennis is so new, there hasn't been a lot of commentary on it. So I think I just want to help educate the public on what the heck it is. Not everyone has seen wheelchair tennis. I think what I can lend is a personal anecdote with a lot of the players that I would be introducing or explaining their game styles. Say I'm talking about a player like Yui Kamiji, I can be like, yeah, every time I played her, I know that if she tosses the ball here, this is what she's going to do. Let's see if she does that here. Like
It's
little
incredible.
personal anecdotes are like, I know that Yui likes to do X, Y, and Z before she plays a match. These are the type of moments that she gets nervous, or things like that I think a lot of commentators don't have that inside scoop where I think that I do. I think that I would like to listen to that if I was watching tennis or any other sport. And so I'd like to be able to add that human element to it. But then I think also just explaining it on a very technical level so people see that it's a sport, just like anything else.
I cannot wait to watch you because I'm serious. I would love to hear those insider tips, those perspectives.
cool. I'm glad
You
to
know
hear
her
that feedback.
absolutely, 100%. Broadening it a little bit because you're going to stay in the world of tennis and probably specifically within the world of elite para tennis. What are the hopes that you want to see for the para world itself? For it to take a step back.
Gosh, I think that I would love to see just more exposure first and foremost. I think we've been so lucky, and I'm sure you've seen it too, like going to different countries, especially like Paris is a good example for the last games. The turnout that we had and the interest in it was phenomenal. I think that I would love to see that happen more in our country. I think that the U.S. is, I always say this, I think that U.S. is one of the best and most accessible places physically. So like if you need a ramp, if you need an elevator, if you need a button to open a door, we're one of the best countries to have that for you. But in terms of having an accessible mindset from a lot of the people that live here, we're not it. And I think a lot of that is just because our country is so big, it's hard to reach the wider audience to let people know that we exist, to let people know that the Paralympics is a thing versus the Special Olympics. Like a lot of people just don't know. And I think that is what I'm so excited for LA 2028 for, because that's a unique opportunity for us to get marketing, to show people what the Paralympics is, to celebrate the fact that the Paralympics and the Olympics are the same thing in terms of being on Team USA. So in terms of the para sport movement in general, I would just love more awareness and more recognition of what it is. I haven't met, and I'm sure you're the same, I haven't met a single person that has seen elite Paralympic sport and not wanted to watch more of it.
It's so
Right?
cool. It is. Yes, I agree.
Yeah, it's
Full
cool.
stop.
It's different. Once people wrap their head around the fact that it's so different and that it is still elite, people are hooked. But I think that can only happen if there's enough exposure to it and you have enough explanation about it. So that's where I think my key role would be in this next phase of my life, is being that person that gets people hooked on what it is and gets people interested. And I think that's when you get to have more sponsorships, more TV deals, more things like that for these athletes, and get them to be household names. And then before you know it, it's skyrocketed all over the world. But until the US kind of buys into that market, I think that's going to be tough. Yeah. But I hope that LA is a turning point for us in that respect.
Yeah. You've mentioned something, elite. This is something that I've heard repetitively from Paralympians, is a sense of frustration that Americans, people outside the US, don't understand of Paralympians as an elite athlete class, literally parallel to the Olympics. If you're open to sharing, what have been some of the ways that you have dealt with that if that feedback comes up, being like, how do you explain that to people?
Oh my gosh, all the time. I think that my stories would be so similar to almost every other Paralympian. It's always just like the people that mean well, but they just miss the mark. So one example that comes to mind, I was with my husband, and someone that he works with came up to me and was like, wow, I love your Instagram. I follow you. I think you're such a great athlete, and I bet even you could beat me. And she's not a tennis player. Like, she's like an old woman. And I'm like, oh, and I looked at her and I was like, okay, like time kind of stops, right? Because those moments are not few and far between. Like, they happen quite often. And this woman meant well. She thought she was giving me a compliment, right? And so you're kind of like, okay, do I be a jerk? Or do I stop time and have a moment to think, like, this is a teachable moment? And so I think I made a joke out of it. And I kind of looked around and I was like, well, I hope I would. It's my job. And, you kind of hope that you teach by saying something. But I think those are the kind of comments that you get more often than not, where people think they're being nice, but they really have no idea what they're talking about. Or people asking questions like, oh, is it like normal tennis? And you're like, like, you're just, it's well-intentioned, but it's someone who is naive or uninformed. And so I think what I try to do in those situations is literally just to educate. I think I try to breathe out the frustration. And if the person wasn't just rude to me, then I try to just educate the best I can and be like, yeah, no, it's a whole sport. It's elite level. We're on Team USA. It's this, that, and the other. It gets exhausting. But I like to think that if enough people of my generation do that, the people in the generation behind me won't have to so much. Yeah. And it is a burden, and it's super annoying, and it's humbling at times in a way that it shouldn't have to be. But that's how I try to approach it. But it is frustrating, and it happens more often than I'd like it to.
Yeah. Dana, please teach me your ways, because like the composure you had in that moment, I think I would have just lost it, honestly, or been...
Really?
Yeah. I mean, I just respect you so much for having that thoughtful level of composure.
Thank you.
That is, I would have been very hurt by that.
Well,
and just
whatever I'm
off.
saying in my head is a lot more triggered.
Yeah. Anything about your story that you feel like you haven't gotten to share yet?
I think we covered a lot of stuff, actually.
Okay.
I think the main thing that I think I would want to hear if I was a listener, especially someone that was like new to disability, is like the activities and the outlets are there. They might be hard to find in terms of finding different sports that you can do, different clubs that you can join. And it's not always about sports. Like, there might be, different support groups, or even people that just go out and they go to coffee shops together and they all have disabilities, or they, like, those groups are there. And I think that having a disability can feel so isolating, especially in a country as big as ours, where there's not, like we talked about, a lot of awareness about, people that have disabilities, whether they be mental, physical, what have you. But the outlets are there, the people are there. The way that you're searching for other people, they're searching for you too. So put yourself out there, try as many different activities as you can. I wouldn't have found tennis if I hadn't tried rugby, basketball, water sports, all of those other things. And then ultimately just be kind to yourself, because I'm sure a lot of other people are looking at you and wishing that they had something that you have, while you're looking in the mirror and hating what you see.
Thanks for tuning in to Flame Bearers Unedited. If you like what you're hearing, please leave us a positive review on your favorite podcasting platform or YouTube. If you want to see more behind the scenes coverage, follow us on social media, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, X, whatever platform you're on, we're there too. Thanks, and we'll catch you on our next episode.